time being, it's impossible for me to take my family back to the UK safely. Well, for a start, the only time that I've come back to the UK is...
The final stroke of Prince William's pen did more than remove a title. It severed a brother from the institution that had defined him since birth. Inside a sealed palace chamber, a decree bearing the future king's authority stripped Harry of the Duke of Sussex title and permanently removed the Sussex name from palace life. Before the document had even left the table, the monarchy had crossed a line from which no family reconciliation could return. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William sat alone at the council table, the final page beneath his hand, like a verdict he could still refuse. He read the last paragraph twice, searching for some phrase that might make the decision feel less permanent. None appeared. The royal decree, a formal order carrying authority to change titles, duties, and access, did not suspend Harry. It removed him. With one signature, the Duke of Sussex title vanished, along with palace roles, ceremonial entry, residences, future representation, and every remaining path back as a working royal. The prince lowered the pen, but his fingers did not release it. The ink had dried, yet he remained motionless, understanding the cost. He had not simply disciplined a royal duke. He had erased his younger brother's place from the reign he was preparing to inherit. That was why the silence felt heavier than anger. Success for the crown had arrived wearing the face of personal loss. Harry received the document in private and began reading while standing. His expression hardened at the first restriction, but the line removing the title changed him. He sat down slowly, gripping the page. Fury came first. Then came something colder. The realization that the identity he had spent years defending and reshaping had been taken by the family that gave it. A hidden clause deepened the wound. The Sussex name could no longer appear in official palace announcements, ceremonial programs, or succession planning, the official preparation for how power, duties, and titles pass into the next reign. This was not exile for a season. It was deletion by design. Then Harry noticed the sealed memorandum behind the decree. King Charles had not authored the order, but his handwritten initials stood beneath a line, confirming he had read it and would not intervene. Harry stared past William's signature and fixed on those initials. The brother had acted, but the father had allowed it. But before Harry could confront the brother who signed away his title, he first had to understand why their father had allowed the decree to reach the table at all. Long before the decree divided them officially, William and Harry had already become strangers bound together by memory, grief, and blood. One brother had spent years preparing to inherit the crown. The other had spent years trying to escape its shadow. Yet neither man was prepared for the moment their conflict became permanent. Behind the titles stood two sons who had once promised to protect each other, and a father now forced to watch that promise collapse. William believed he was protecting something larger than himself. The crown, the monarchy as an institution, including its authority, duties, and future stability, could not survive another reign dominated by competing stories, private accusations, and endless uncertainty. As heir, the prince feared that every unresolved dispute would follow him onto the throne. Yet Harry saw the same decree differently. The Duke of Sussex title was more than rank. It was his final official connection to the family he had left, but never fully stopped needing. Catherine heard the conflict in William's voice before anyone else did. During a private conversation days before the signing, he told her that every compromise had failed, and every attempt at trust had ended in another wound. He spoke firmly about duty, succession, and the future of the monarchy. But when he said Harry's name, his voice faltered. The Princess of Wales did not interrupt. She simply asked what signing would do to him as a brother. William looked away because he had no answer that sounded like victory. Harry called King Charles moments after reading the decree. He did not begin calmly. He demanded to know whether his father had approved the removal, whether the king had known that the title would disappear, and whether silence had become the palace's final judgment against him. Charles listened without defending himself. Then he gave the answer that broke what little hope remained. "I did not prevent it." The sentence was measured, almost careful, yet it struck harder than a direct admission. Harry understood that his father had not been powerless. He had chosen not to act. William had delayed the decree for weeks. Palace officials warned in documented briefings that continued hesitation could weaken his authority before accession. The formal moment when an heir becomes sovereign. Again and again, the future king returned the unsigned pages. Then a private letter arrived from Harry. It was not an apology. In the written message, he demanded recognition and threatened to reveal a confidential palace exchange if William continued shutting him out. The letter changed everything. Its warning pointed back to one royal ceremony, one private confrontation, and one moment when pain became leverage. And the path to that signature did not begin in a council chamber. It began during one ceremony, when a quiet act of defiance turned a damaged relationship into an irreversible royal crisis. Every royal rupture has a moment that later becomes impossible to forget. For William and Harry, it came during a private remembrance ceremony at St. George's Chapel, where the family had gathered under strict instructions that no personal disputes would enter the service. Yet one whispered exchange beside the vestry door shattered that fragile peace. What Harry said, and what William did immediately afterward, became the hidden trigger behind the decree that would eventually erase Sussex from palace life. Years of resentment had already reduced the brothers to distant voices carried through advisors. Strained interviews, private accusations, disputed security arrangements, missed ceremonies, and failed attempts at peace had made direct conversation feel dangerous. King Charles arranged the remembrance ceremony as one final controlled opportunity to bring his sons together without cameras or speeches. St. George's Chapel, a royal church used for family services and historic ceremonies, was meant to provide neutral ground. Instead, it became the place where restraint finally broke. Harry approached William beside the vestry door after the service. The vestry is the private room where clergy prepare and ceremonial items are kept, hidden from the public areas of the chapel. He placed a hand on his brother's arm and demanded a guaranteed role for himself and his family at William's future coronation. That ceremony would formally crown the heir as monarch, making every position beside him a powerful statement of trust and belonging. William refused to make promises under pressure. Harry's voice dropped. He warned that if the future king continued excluding him, he would release details from a confidential conversation involving Charles and the future of the Sussex children. The threat was quiet, but its meaning was unmistakable. Family information had become leverage. The prince did not shout. He removed Harry's hand from his arm, stepped back, and said, "Then you have already chosen what comes next." The distance between them lasted only a few feet, yet it carried years of grief. Harry stared at him, waiting for anger or fear. William offered neither. His cold control frightened him more. Charles witnessed the final seconds. After his younger son walked away, the king urged William not to act in anger. The heir answered that anger had ended years earlier, and responsibility was all that remained. Charles felt the words land like a warning. His elder son was no longer making decisions as a wounded brother. He was thinking as a future monarch. A palace secretary later recorded the exchange in a documented account because it involved an implied threat concerning confidential royal discussions. That record became the foundation for the decree. The secret Harry threatened to expose was less explosive than William expected, but the attempt to use it proved that trust had collapsed. Still, the future king offered one last chance. He requested a private meeting before signing, giving his brother a final opportunity to withdraw the threat and preserve his title. That final meeting would not become a reconciliation, because when the brothers faced each other without advisors, neither came prepared to surrender the one thing he believed the other had stolen. The room contained no courtiers, no lawyers, and no father capable of interrupting them. William stood beside the fireplace while Harry remained near the closed door, each man refusing the comfort of a chair. Between them lay the unsigned decree. It was the last moment in which the Duke of Sussex title could have been saved. Yet the conversation quickly revealed a harsher truth. Neither brother was fighting over a title anymore. They were fighting over whose pain deserved to be believed. William had chosen a small private room at Windsor, so no aide could shape the exchange, or later be blamed for blocking honesty. Windsor was not merely a royal residence, it was one of the monarchy's central homes, and a place tied to both brothers' childhood memories. The prince pointed toward the red folder on the table. Inside rested the decree, a formal royal order capable of removing duties, privileges, and status. He told Harry the process would stop if he withdrew the threat, accepted strict confidentiality, and ended public attacks against the family. Harry refused before his brother had finished. He accused William of confusing obedience with peace, and silence with loyalty. The institution had always protected the heir, he said, while everyone else was expected to endure its decisions without protest. The younger brother's voice remained low, but every word carried years of resentment. He was no longer pleading for a place. He was demanding that his pain be treated as evidence. William's control finally cracked. He told Harry that every private conversation had become potential ammunition, and every family wound risked being turned into public leverage. Trust could not survive when grief was repeatedly carried outside the room and used against those who had shared it. Harry's expression hardened. The accusation did not come from a distant future king. It came from the brother who had once understood his fear without explanation. Harry reached for the red folder. William placed his hand over it. Silence held them there, until the younger man asked whether a document mattered more than their mother's wish that they remain united. The prince's answer came without hesitation. "Do not use her to excuse what you chose." Then William revealed the truth. The original decree had removed only palace duties. Harry would have kept the title. But the threat to expose confidential discussions convinced the heir that royal status could no longer remain in the hands of someone willing to challenge the crown with private information. Harry answered with a confession. He had never intended to release the conversation immediately. He wanted William to feel the same fear and powerlessness he had carried for years. It was retaliation, not negotiation. Harry opened the door and looked back once. Then sign it. As Harry walked away from the brother he no longer trusted, Charles entered the room, knowing that stopping the decree might save one son while destroying the authority of the other. King Charles still possessed the authority to delay the decree, but authority was no longer the same as control. He entered the room after Harry's departure and found William staring at the closed door, the red folder untouched between them. For one final moment, the father could have intervened. Instead, the king faced an impossible choice: protect the son who felt abandoned, or support the heir whose future reign depended upon proving that his decisions could not be overturned by private emotion. Charles remained sovereign, yet William had already begun carrying more responsibility for the monarchy's long-term future. The transition from one reign to the next meant more than a change of title. It was the transfer of authority, duties, and public trust from the king to his heir. If the monarch overruled the prince on a decision tied directly to that future, the palace would reveal a split at its highest level. Senior constitutional advisors could not command Charles, but their documented briefing warned that continued uncertainty around Harry's status might create competing expectations once William took the throne. The king lifted the decree and found the clause removing the title. His eyes remained on Harry's name long after he finished reading. Then he placed the pages down without speaking. The language was cold, legal, and precise, but the man holding it was still a father. Every sentence designed to protect the institution seemed to close another door on his younger son. Charles finally asked whether punishment had become personal. William turned from the door and answered that it was personal, because trust was personal. The future king added that the consequences were constitutional, because Harry still carried a title tied to the crown. A constitutional consequence meant a decision affecting the monarchy's official authority, not merely the feelings of one family. The prince spoke with control, but his voice carried the exhaustion of someone who had spent years expecting the next betrayal. The monarch confessed that he feared losing Harry permanently. William answered that the family had already lived beneath that fear for years. Every boundary had been delayed because another interview, accusation, or rupture might follow. Fear had become protection for indecision, and indecision had become its own danger. Charles then admitted he had offered Harry another path. Through a private written agreement, the younger son could have kept the title while living as a non-working family member without official duties. Harry rejected it because the arrangement demanded permanent confidentiality regarding internal family discussions. The king reached for the accompanying memorandum. He added his initials beneath the acknowledgement line, confirming that he would neither block nor reverse the decree. The gesture took seconds. Its burden would last far longer. By the time Charles left the chamber, the decision had moved beyond father and son, and palace officials were already preparing to erase the privileges that had once made Harry's return possible. The decree became real not through a public announcement, but through a sequence of quiet removals. A security credential stopped working. A ceremonial listing disappeared. A key was placed inside an envelope. Across several palace offices, Harry's name was deleted from records that had carried it since childhood. Each action appeared administrative, almost emotionless, yet together, they formed something far more brutal: the systematic closing of every door through which the king's younger son might once have returned. Palace staff received sealed instructions before sunrise. The Duke of Sussex designation was removed from future court circulars, official seating plans, ceremonial schedules, and internal papers linked to William's eventual reign. A court circular is the formal daily record of royal engagements, and losing a place within it meant Harry would no longer appear as part of the monarchy's working life. His remaining access to Windsor, Buckingham Palace, and restricted royal estates also ended. Any future entry would require a personal invitation from the sovereign or heir, not the automatic right once carried by birth and title. Harry discovered the change through a screen. He opened a secure digital archive containing papers from his years as a working royal, entered his credentials, and waited. The message appeared without ceremony: access no longer recognized. He shut the laptop sharply. Seconds later, he opened it again and repeated the process, as though the same password might somehow restore the life attached to it. Meghan watched him struggle between anger and humiliation. She told Harry that no title had ever defined the man he had become. He looked at her and answered that people could say that easily when they were not the ones from whom it had been taken. The words landed hard. She moved closer, but he remained fixed on the failed login, staring at proof that the palace had already moved on. Charles encountered the loss in a different way. At Windsor, a longtime equerry removed Harry's nameplate from a private guest suite. An equerry is a senior royal aide who manages personal duties and ceremonial arrangements. The king entered without warning, saw the empty space on the door, and stopped. The aide began to explain. Charles lifted one hand, turned away, and left before the sentence could finish. William's future household moved quickly. Ceremonial responsibilities once informally reserved for his brother were reassigned to members of the immediate family, showing that the next reign was already being built without Harry. Yet one object remained untouched: a locked archive box containing childhood letters between the brothers. The prince personally ordered that it stay sealed. Then Harry received a private message from Catherine, asking to speak with him alone. With every official path back to the palace now closed, Harry accepted one final private conversation, not with the brother who signed the decree, but with the woman who still remembered who those brothers had once been. Catherine did not contact Harry as the Princess of Wales, nor did she speak on William's behalf. She asked for one conversation between two people who had once shared laughter, grief, and the exhausting burden of royal expectation. They met without aides, and without any document on the table. For the first time since the decree was signed, Harry was not asked to defend his choices or surrender his anger. He was asked a simpler question: what did he truly believe the title had protected? Catherine arranged a private telephone call after Harry refused to meet in person. She made one boundary clear before anything else: William did not know the details, and she had no authority to reverse the decree. The Princess of Wales was the wife of the future king and a senior working royal. But this conversation carried no official power. Her purpose was personal. She wanted to stop anger from hardening into permanent hatred before Charles's reign ended and another family chapter closed beyond repair. Harry listened without interrupting until she asked what had hurt most. Was it losing the title, losing palace access, or knowing his brother had signed the order? Silence stretched across the line. Then he answered. William's signature had confirmed his darkest fear. The man who once protected him now saw him as a danger to be contained. The loss of status wounded him, but the loss of trust cut deeper. Catherine did not defend the decision. She told him the prince had not signed quickly, proudly, or without pain. He had delayed the decree, argued over its language, and privately grieved before accepting that uncertainty could no longer rule the crown. Harry's answer came quietly. Grief without mercy, he said, still left the same wound. She heard no rage in his voice now, only exhaustion. Then Catherine challenged him. His demand to be heard had repeatedly become a weapon against the relationships he claimed to want restored. Harry did not deny it. Through the private recorded call, he admitted that causing fear had sometimes felt like the only proof that the palace could still feel what it had done to him. The confession was not an excuse. It was the first honest surrender of the night. Catherine revealed one final detail. William had ordered a sealed archive box containing their childhood letters to remain untouched. Harry understood what that meant. The decree had ended his official place, but his brother had not erased every private trace of him. Harry made his choice. He would not release the confidential conversation he had threatened to expose. Forgiveness remained impossible, but revenge would not define the final act between them. Before ending the call, Catherine warned him that the palace announcement would be released at dawn. Harry had chosen silence over revenge, but when dawn arrived, the palace would speak for him, and millions would decide what the fall of the Duke of Sussex meant. At 9 o'clock, the palace statement appeared in language so restrained that its meaning felt even more severe. Prince Harry would no longer hold the Duke of Sussex title, exercise royal privileges, or maintain an official place within palace life. Within minutes, broadcasters abandoned regular programming, newspaper websites replaced their front pages, and crowds gathered outside royal gates. A private war between two brothers had become a public verdict on loyalty, authority, and the limits of belonging. William's authority stood at the center of the announcement. The statement confirmed that the prince had authorized the decree with Charles's acknowledgement and described the decision as final, permanent, and necessary for the monarchy's future stability. A palace statement is the institution's official public message, carefully written to establish one clear version of events. This one left no path back. Staff were ordered to use Prince Harry only in historical family references and remove the Sussex designation from all new ceremonial programs, schedules, and records. London reacted before the palace gates had fully filled. Newsstands carried a black-and-white photograph of William signing beneath the enormous headline, "Brothers No More," the decree that ended Sussex. Commuters stopped beside the front page. Some raised their phones. Others simply stared, struck by the image of one brother ending the public identity of the other with a pen. Outside Buckingham Palace, a small crowd gathered behind the barriers. Buckingham Palace is the monarch's principal working headquarters and the public symbol of royal authority. One woman placed two childhood photographs of William and Harry beside the gates. Between them sat a handwritten card, "A crown should not cost a brother." The message spread across broadcasts within minutes, turning private grief into the image that defined the day. The country divided sharply. Supporters praised the future king for ending uncertainty and protecting clear institutional boundaries. Critics argued that permanent exclusion had transformed a family dispute into royal banishment. Every debate returned to the same question: had William defended the crown, or sacrificed his brother to prove he could control it? William watched the coverage without sound. When the childhood photographs appeared, the prince reached for the remote, then stopped. He set it down and forced himself to keep watching. Authority had brought order, but order had not brought relief. Harry answered through a brief written statement released by his representative. He accepted that the decree had taken effect. He did not attack William, reveal the confidential conversation, or challenge the title removal. Commentators expecting retaliation found only restraint. That silence changed the day. The brother removed from palace life had chosen not to strike back, leaving the man who signed the decree alone with its cost. And in Harry's refusal to retaliate, the decree reached its final meaning, not as the victory of one brother over another, but as the permanent price both men would carry. When the ceremonies, headlines, and palace statements finally faded, the decree left behind no winner. William had secured the authority of his future reign, yet he had done so by formally removing the brother who once stood beside him through the darkest moment of their childhood. Harry had lost the title connecting him to royal life, yet his refusal to retaliate preserved something the document could not remove: the power to decide what kind of man he would become after the crown rejected him. Harry remained the king's son by birth, but every official bond had been severed. The Duke of Sussex title, palace privileges, ceremonial access, public duties, and any future working role were permanently gone. A working royal is a family member who formally represents the monarch through public engagements and official service. That path no longer existed for him. William's decree also became the clearest sign of how the future king intended to rule: firmly, decisively, and without allowing unresolved family conflict to weaken the crown. William returned alone to the chamber where he had signed. The prince opened the sealed archive box and found a childhood letter written by Harry years before either brother understood what duty would demand from them. In that letter, the younger boy had promised they would always remain a team. William read the words twice, folded the page carefully, and placed it back inside. He closed the lid, but he did not destroy the letter. The decree had ended a royal partnership. It could not erase the memory of one. Harry faced the document differently. He placed the printed decree inside a drawer instead of tearing it apart. Meghan stood nearby, as he told her he would not spend the rest of his life asking an institution to restore what it had deliberately removed. His sadness remained, but it no longer controlled his next choice. She listened as he accepted that freedom sometimes arrived carrying the shape of rejection. Charles wrote privately to both sons. In the documented letters, the king accepted his failure to unite them before authority replaced affection. He did not ask William to reverse the order, or Harry to forgive it. He admitted that silence had protected the monarchy, while costing the family its final chance to remain whole. Catherine later informed William through a private conversation that Harry would not release the confidential exchange. The future monarch closed his eyes briefly. His brother had shown restraint at the exact moment retaliation had been expected. The decree succeeded politically. It ended uncertainty, secured the future hierarchy, and removed Sussex from palace power. Emotionally, it marked the moment the monarchy chose institutional certainty over family repair. Harry left without the title he once carried. William moved closer to the throne, with greater authority and less family beside him. Neither returned to the other. The Sussex chapter inside the palace was closed forever, and the monarchy moved forward, stronger in authority, poorer in family, and permanently marked by the signature that chose the crown over a brother. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.